Hello and welcome back to Valoranting. This week we've got some exciting topics to cover. A lot of stuff has been happening in the Valorant community this week. We have an exodus, a mass exodus of Tier 2 CSGO players coming over to Valorant. The Fnatic Open and T1 Invitational results, as well as some patch notes that just came off today. I'm joined this week by none other than Pansy and Potter. For those of you who don't know Potter, she is a multi-time world champion CS player as well as a CSGO analyst. And I'm excited to break into these topics. How are you guys doing this week?
Yeah, I'm pretty
Bueno,
excited.
good.
I mean, yeah, I'm super excited to talk about everything that's gone on so far. I think the patch notes just coming out, was it this morning or this afternoon, depending on which region you're in, kind of look pretty interesting to talk through. The tournament results are exciting. There's a lot to be seen.
I'm excited to see how detailed these patch notes are as well. I mean, I think I, my expectations were pretty low, especially because I'm a CS player and with Valve and everything. But I think the I think the response
She's been
is
beaten,
it's
dude. She's
and turnaround it's really fast. Yeah, I know. I'm like a traumatized like gamer child from CS at the moment.
Various exploits and bug fixes, I'm sure you're used to seeing now and again. But, I'm excited to
have a
talk about the
Krieg.
patch notes as well. As the Krieg. Anyway, let's not go down that road. The first topic I actually wanted to talk about right out of the gate, and I wanted to pose this to you guys as this is kind of a community related topic. The expansion, the beta, it's ongoing, but already we're seeing new regions being added to the fold. Korea, Brazil, and South America coming into the fold now for the first time. And there's been a little bit of a tease as well. Some Chinese influencers invited to a CSGO like beta event in China this week as well. So I'm excited to see how these new regions come in. Pansy, how do you feel that? Let's lead off with Korea. How do you think Korea is going to do coming into the fold first?
For me, I'm just I wait with bated breath, right? Because I don't think we've ever really seen a Korean team in a Counter-Strike specific like game being headliners. They've contested, they've looked good occasionally, they've never kind of pushed tier one. However, when you look at Overwatch, obviously FPS, it's kind of sitting somewhere between it, right? They were pretty dominant. I mean, the whole North American League got basically taken over by incredibly good Korean pickups. It's hard to deny how talented they are. So it's like, where does this kind of Korean power fit into this CS style game? Because we haven't seen them highlight yet in a CS style game, but they've also found that pinnacle in very similar FPS games. So this is going to be a really good litmus test.
Oh, I think they're gonna
Absolutely.
completely own. I think they're gonna completely own
You
everyone. Dude, I've
believe
been running into so many Korean players in the ranked system at like
already?
4 a.m. They've got, yeah, dude, they've got like 150 ping and they're just destroying everyone. So I'm super excited that they've expanded across the regions. Hopefully, I stop running into 180 ping Asians that just destroy us in ranked all night long. So I'm excited to see it.
In the first couple of weeks, my understanding was that there was a Korean five stack in the high elo, just absolutely trashing teams. And I imagine now that they're going to have the proper servers and all that kind of stuff, we're going to see a little
Yeah,
bit more of a growth in that region, obviously, because a lot of people would probably just be
yeah.
like, "Oh, I'll wait for it's available. I don't want to play with 180 ping." And the dedication that comes out of that market often, I remember back in the day,
It's
this is
nuts.
something that was just kind of Reddit conjecture that Koreans didn't want to pick up FPS games or RTS heavy. Not the case. We saw that in Overwatch, and I imagine we'll be seeing that in Valorant as well. Looking at Brazil, however, Potter, this is I guess more of an emergence over the last 5 years in the Brazilian market of very high level players. So SK Gaming, former, well, now MIBR comes to mind. They had a tremendous run as one of the top CS:GO teams ever made or ever to play. How do you think Brazil specifically is going to pick this up? Are we going to see more of a shift away from CS, or is it just going to be more of the same and high level talent coming out of Brazil?
I think, man, that's such a tough question for me. I think it's very dependent on things like these patch notes that are coming out. If Riot keeps on this same trajectory and they're able to keep the player base happy, I think this patch note that just came out will keep players happy. So I think if that's the case, then yeah, it's certainly going to grow. And especially in Brazil, I mean, you mentioned it just now, Moses, SK, they kind of spearheaded this whole movement of having a large community down there in South America where everyone is just ride or die Counter-Strike fans, and they certainly know how to grind out games. So I think Brazil is certainly gonna be a top contender for Valorant for sure.
I think that the Brazilian region is obviously extremely passionate about all shooter games.
Yeah.
Mobile, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
FPS games are like Brazil's; they just love it. And when it
Bread and
comes to
butter, right?
Korea,
Yeah.
I think Korea is going to be my pick to be a dominant force in this game as well. It's been designed from the ground up to be acceptable for broadcast in markets like China. Same with Korea, all these types of things. Spike
Dude.
instead of the bomb. Defense and attack versus
China's gonna
obviously
own it, man.
CT&T. Yeah, and that's
I'm
that's
I'm
the
playing
that's
on
the question I
China.
wanted to pose to you, Pansy. Is China going to be that force that we've seen in other games? Well, we both come from PUBG. We know how good those teams have been there,
Oh, yeah.
and they don't really get access to a lot of these types of games. So, what do you think that the first year of Chinese Valorant looks like?
See, that's the thing, right? It's like they really haven't had the same sort of access. I think for me, I look at Crossfire as like a good waypoint because that's huge in kind of any of the Asian scene. It's massive. It was always kind of a competitor Counter-Strike in that specific region. It never really had the legs out here at all to compete, so it didn't really matter. It was very similar to like a 1.6 sort of looking game. So it's like it already has the foundations, and we've already seen what can come out of China, and they are like, you know, world beating class. I think that Korea's the safe bet, right? Because we've seen it happen in Overwatch, we've seen it, you know, through StarCraft. Anyone who's been in the esports scene for like, I don't know, 10 plus years is always afraid of the Koreans picking up another game. We know what happens, right? It's like every team is just hammered by them. But I think China is going to be the one that kind of catches people off here if they haven't had a scene exposed to it as much. Like I think PUBG obviously had a big eye opening to what they can bring when they have like you know the facilities available to them and the game's appropriate for the region as well, which obviously Valorant is. So I think Korea's the safe bet. I think China is going to be the dark horse in this that could definitely surprise a lot of people.
Thinking about how the Chinese market kind of adapts to games as well. It might take a little while for them to kind of get into the strategy. Obviously, the rest of the world, China doesn't really have to your point, Pansy, a CS kind of background. They have Crossfire, which is a similar kind of variant, but not nearly the same popularity. But for Valorant to be a AAA title, League of Legends already being a large portion of, and Dota as well, being a large portion of their gaming landscape in China, having that mature is actually very scary. We might see a level of domination, or at least based on pure population and numbers alone, a lot of top talent coming out of China and interacting with the rest of the world. But we have to move on. There's some news this morning. Patch notes, a massive patch dropping. 5.0 patch notes just released, and there is a ton of changes to go over. I wanted to lead off with just some of the basics. The weapons have been altered. The rifle patterns, spray patterns have been changed. Sage, Cypher, Omen, Viper, Brimstone, Phoenix, they've all been altered. Potter, right out of the gate, what is your big takeaway initially from these patch notes?
I think it's certainly got to be that walking accuracy. I mean, I think there are even some players in Valorant that were binding their walk to their shoot. There was a lot of little small gimmicky things that players were doing to kind of gain an advantage. So I think it's fantastic that Riot have identified it and kind of just taken it head on right off the bat. I haven't played quite yet with this patch, so I'm curious to
It
see
came out 3
exactly
hours ago.
how
I'll forgive it.
effective. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I'm dedicated, but I'm not that dedicated quite yet, but not that deddy yet. But, and I'm also excited about these agent changes. I mean, I think it's to be expected that these agents are going to be changed on a constant basis. And I'm a Sage main, so I'm kind of sad to see how her OP kit has been nerfed a little bit, but it makes sense, right? It makes sense. Those slow
Dude, you're
orbs.
fine.
Yeah, those slow orbs, they
Fine.
were they were they were a little bit they were a little bit OP, and I think it's gonna change the dynamic completely for pistol round, especially because the price changed,
Yeah.
making it 400 credits. I think that's the most expensive utility out of all the agents right now, so that's gonna be a huge change.
I'm looking at Omen. I'm looking at
Yeah.
Omen here, and the cover and the smoke. I think he's going to be a more picked agent now. I think that it's going to start coming down between Brimstone versus Omen in the picks. I think Breach is still going to be the A1 entry character and or agent rather. And looking back to and talking about Sage, just the slow orb changes alone massively impact her ability to control areas. And realistically, I think is going to affect pistol rounds most of anything. Getting those slow orb and pistol rounds, man, that was it can be really rough.
Yeah,
I
exactly. And
think
now, I
for
mean,
me, real
sages have
quick.
to make. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
No, go ahead. You're on topic. I was about to just go off topic, so go for it, dude.
I just wanted to mention one more time that sages will have to make a decision whether they want the one orb or they want the wall instead,
Yep.
or they just forego armor altogether and get one of each. But either way, I mean that price change in the slow orb, it's going to be huge, huge, huge on pistols.
The next thing I
Yeah,
wanted to speak
no.
on was the changes to split Pansy. A massive, well, not a massive, but a map that was relatively, if not constantly, defender sided. Split receiving a lot of changes. They've altered where these start points go. Do you think this is going to upset the balance of this map? Is it going to be more even? Do you think it's maybe too much coming back towards the attackers an advantage?
Honestly, I don't. I really hope they're not going to baby it down. I don't mind maps that are, certain sided. It's like saying, well, why is Nuke in the pool, in CS:GO? It's CT sided, right? I don't. I don't want them to baby the player base too much. I'm a little worried that they've gone to looking at the general pool of players who aren't willing to realize the concepts of what could potentially make that map great and gone, actually, let's neuter it down a bit, let's water it down a little. I think they could have. I think I want to see it in action first. I want to see more teams playing it. I think people got scared and just instant vetoed it because if you start on attack, it can be rough. But that's the point. Like, not all maps have to be 50-50. Some of the more fun maps are when you have those side biases in play and you see teams kind of finding ways around it, and that's exciting. That creates like a deeper meta. So I'm a little worried that they're gonna start watering down the map pool slightly to pander to people who aren't willing to learn some of the harder aspects. I mean, on Split, it creates this kind of aspect of learning that taking mid control and then punishing rotations or causing those rotations is a big factor. And without that, or that being slightly easier now for the attackers, you've kind of neutralized what made that map exciting and different. I don't think you need to be doing that too much. I'm hoping when I play it, I don't feel that a little too much. But for now, I'm a little worried that they've toned it down a bit too much.
Looking at the notes here, and I'll put this to you, Potter. I believe that Split. I think the changes they've made here are mostly just on initial round timing, and most of the changes are specifically around just where you begin the game and changing the way that attackers have access, that kind of thing. But I want to talk a little bit about the B site, which I believe is my most popular on attacking side to split through B and come into that tower area, which is now going to have some changes. They're changing the stairs. They're also changing the box on the B site to be a solid non-penetratable. You can't penetrate that box anymore on the site, the single stack box. Do you think that is going to shift more of the focus back towards A, or is Split going to see more of an even keel between B and A pushes now?
I think it will. I think A is going to be the end game for most attacking players on Split. I think it was even prior to the change, and I have to echo kind of Lauren's point here is that I'm a little disappointed with the changes so early on, just because I think a map that makes it a lot more challenging to attack a site forces and demands players to be a little bit more clever and creative in their approach. So I think it was a little too early on to change the entirety of a map. But yeah, I do think that players will have to lean more towards that A, because as soon as you get that A control, it's going to force players off of that mid, make them go towards that ropes to kind of respect that A heaven push. So yeah, I think again, it's a little too early to really understand how players are going to approach this just because it's so up in the air. But I do think
Yeah,
A
and
is
it
the
just
end
came
game
out.
for most attackers. Yeah.
Absolutely. So the one thing that is going to be universally interesting to watch, regardless of what level of play you're at, is the changes to rifles. There's been some changes
Hell
to
yeah.
how the rifles reset the recoil, how you can tap and burst and spray in a much different way now. If we could pull up the changes to rifles, I wanted to dive into to the technical aspects there, as the rifle and gunplay has been generally satisfying. But my experience, at least as a middling FPS gamer, is that the consistency of recoil recoil reset and being able to spray transfer, hit consistent sprays at distance, tapping, and all these different things. The Vandal specifically, one of my favorite weapons, has now had its recoil altered. What's your go-to, Potter? Just because we've never played together, what's your go-to, and how do you take these initial changes to the rifles?
I'm excited about these initial changes. I think multi kills in this game right now is really challenging and really punishing. I think as soon as your position is exploited by the enemy team, whether it be from a Sova arrow or any sort of drone, you're kind of screwed, right? So I like the fact that the recoil recovery time has been reduced. I think it's going to allow players to be a little bit more risky in those forward positions and go for a double kill instead of just a one and done spot where they get immediately punished. So a lot of players right now, they're kind of traumatized. You can't really afford to make a lot more riskier plays by yourself. So I think this will enable players to go for those types of plays just because the recovery time is going to be there. So I'm excited to see it play out. Now, at the moment, I'm actually a Vandal player. Um, Only because the one tap is a lot more satisfying, and there's nothing more tilting than getting 140 damage with the Phantom and then just getting laid out.
Yes.
So at the
Yep.
moment, I do lean a little bit more towards the Vandal. But I mean, Phantom is just it's clearly just a better gun in a lot more scenarios. It just really depends on your playstyle, I suppose. But for me at the moment, I'm leaning a lot more towards the Vandal. It's just has so many AK vibes to it, you know?
I mean, with
Now,
that vertical like reduction of recoil, surely that's going to be OP as hell. Like, I mean,
It
15%
should be,
reduction
right?
is pretty big.
Yeah.
Like, that's a big, like, obviously, like if anyone tried to spray with the Vandal, you can't really, you couldn't really do it in the previous version. So I mean, if that's been like toned down, that gun should be 100% as viable, because the amount of times like I pick up the Phantom, I run with it, I like try and Zentaris peek everything because you could just like insta walk and have 100% accuracy. So it's like now with that being an option on the Vandal, in a way, with that kind of reduction of of this, I guess the vertical recoil, the horizontal recoil on that, should I say, not vertical, but it means it should be playable. It should be far more competitive and not just depend on like hitting that one bang. You know what I mean? Like, sure, like most people who are like high tier players, I think seeing statistically how it looks should have been playing the Vandal, right? Like I play Phantom because I need a little bit more time to kind of recover. I'm not expecting everyone to, tap me in the head instantly, but when you get up to higher elo, people can do that. So you now have to kind of match it. So I'm glad they've kind of created a bit of a difference. Again, it's super early to tell though, because I haven't had time to get hands on with it. I don't know how it actually feels right now. And a lot of it will come down to just that pure feeling, right? Like statistically, there's been guns that should be insane, but people haven't picked in previous games or haven't like utilized as much, because people don't necessarily look at statistics straight away. They look at how it feels, how it plays. Like, I mean, the Krieg, the AUG, these sort of things in CS for a long time, the auto sniper, the CZ, guns before they were nerfed and exploited, people didn't really realize how OP they were until someone was the trendsetter to show you, well, actually, no, that is super viable. You just have to play it slightly differently. But I think now with the Vandal being a little bit kind of shifted into viability, that should kind of even it out, right?
and the Phantom did receive a bit of a buff as well. Its recovery time has been significantly, I guess, reduced in this situation. So the rifles are going to be handling different, and that in pairing with the walk accuracy, or the run to walk accuracy changes, is going to really, I think, alter how the gunplay feels for the next little while. I'm interested to see if people actually like it. We know that when people get comfortable, especially at that higher elo pro level, especially changes to gunplay can be very controversial. So looking at the benefits, that notion, at least they covered this in the patch notes, that when you see someone that appears to be running full speed, just like one tapping you, I experienced that a lot, unfortunately, because I'm not as good as everybody else. But the differences being made there will be exciting to see. Now, we don't want to dive into every single aspect of the patches, but the Cypher and map changes, I think, go hand in hand. The Cyber Cage no longer slowing the player down. We've seen essentially 100% pick rate for Cypher across most meaningful competition. Do you feel that the changes to Cypher are going to be enough to not really knock him off as the top guy, but I mean the spy cam cooldown is being increased by 15 seconds as well when you destroy it. So just looking at the Cypher changes, considering the impact that this player or this agent has on high level play, Potter, what do you think about the change to Cypher, and what has been your experience playing against high level Cypher players?
Ooh, Cypher's been rough, especially in the mid tier. I think in my right now, I just got D-ranked to Diamond 3, and I think in the Diamond tier, it's so hard to counter
Wait. Can we just
Cypher.
appreciate you called diamond tier like mid tier? Can we just for everyone down in like dirt level? They're like they're sat there just like this bitch, dude, this freaking bitch. Just
No,
lower
let me clarify.
mid-tier.
I think the ranking system. Oh no! I didn't mean to insult everyone out there. No, I think the ranking
For all
system
you
at the
plebs
moment
in
it's
platinum.
kind of, yeah, all you filthy casuals out there. I think later on down the road, maybe maybe when the game gets released or maybe in a month or so, the ranks will kind of even out. And at the moment, I think there's a lot of, how do I say it, newbies or people that aren't as good that actually are in the diamonds. So I'm referring to diamond as lower tier just because that's what I think it is at the moment.
You're not
But
helping, dude. You're not
I'm not
helping.
helping at all. I don't know why I'm trying to explain this. Filthy
Lean
casuals
into
in
it.
diamond don't know how to have an answer for Cypher. So I think it makes sense, but I don't know. I think he got a huge nerf. I think without the cage, the slowing cage, his utility, he's just not able to control the map quite as much. And sure, his camera was gimmicky, but I don't think that nerf is quite as big as the slows on the cages. I think that
Yeah.
changes his playstyle completely, and I don't know how effective he'll be anymore, to be honest with you.
I don't think I play a lot of Cypher, almost exclusively actually, and the slow in the Cyber Cage with the traps and the Sova arrows, you can absolutely just tear through a team through their executes, and the slow, I think, considering the amount of extra utility you normally have if you're playing at a decent level, rotates will come in. You'll have the utility coming from your teammates. Removing the slow is certainly a big change, but I mean, considering on Haven, especially early on, Cypher is able to just leave the site, essentially. Just leave the cages up, leave the traps up, leave the cameras up, and just go somewhere else. And that slow being gone, I think, is going to force Cypher players to be a little bit more present, and is going to give less of an advantage rather to the defense, or really any situation where those Cyber cages are being paired with extra utility, because that slow is just murderous, especially if you have any level of area reveal or anything else going on in that way. So I wanted to give you the final thoughts on the patch notes. I'll start with you, Pansy. What was your highlights of the patch notes, and anything you kind of disagree with? Right, just final thoughts on that.
Overall, I just taking a step back, just saying I'm happy to see these sort of patches coming out, like this much of a big change. They seem aware of it. Even stepping back further from that, I worry to where they're tuning this game to. Are you tuning it to the general audience or your high-end audience? You know, some of these changes look great for a as Potter says, not, her level of play, but those mid-tier players up in whatever it is, like Platinum 3. But it's that thing where it's like, I hope they don't tone their game down so far that it stops people having to learn. That's my only thing, right? And that's just being a bit critical overall. Just I'd rather them be overzealous with the patches for now, just to show that they're actually giving a fuck. Because, as said, being part of previous communities, or PUBG and Counter-Strike, what the fuck have I had to deal with for like the last 10 years of my career? Like, hey, have a patch of nothing you've wanted. Welcome. There's some chickens on a map and a music kit. Nice. It's like, okay, at least they're trying to kind of stay on point. But I do worry that rather than addressing you know, that sometimes games are hard and you have to learn ways around it. You have to be creative and let the players have that capability of learning, lose the game, and then you come back stronger. I'm worried they're going to tone it down a little too much and then kind of make it all a bit too gray. But for now, it's welcomed. Just keep doing it, and we'll see how it goes. It's too early to tell. This is beta access, obviously. I think it's beta, right? It's closed beta at the moment. So it's like, if now's the time to do it, right? Now's the time to do it. Get it all going, see how people feel, test it out, and then run with it. I mean, I'm more happy to see it than not, right?
I want to pivot very quickly for Potter because what you said, Pans, just kind of brought something to my mind here. Looking at Overwatch, another hero-based shooter that overtuned and continuously shifted the talents and just their balancing has really made it difficult for anyone to keep up with the changes. That would be something that I would be concerned about. Is that something that you think about, that constant changes to agents is going to keep things shifting too quickly? That might make it difficult for players to Pansy's credit, learn how to play around these small issues, the slow and the cyber cage. Do you think that Riot is maybe taking a bit too much of an aggressive stance in changing these characters early and maybe tuning other areas of the game around agents versus tuning the agents themselves? Do you think that is going to be a better idea considering what happened to Overwatch and the roster of agents that they had to deal with?
I can't imagine that Riot will approach it in that same manner. I think that they just yeah, I'm satisfied with the changes in the agents at the moment. I'm more concerned about the map exploits and bug type situations. Like
Yep.
for instance, right now, what I'm running into on a constant basis is this Phoenix wall, putting up his C wall, and for some reason they're able to change their video settings and they can see clearly through their own wall where you can't see them at all. And then there's the cipher cams, right, where there's a gentleman's
Yep.
agreement before the game on Split where you're like, are you going to use the exploit cam or not? So these small things that I hope is addressed and identified right off the bat, because if this is another one of those scenarios where, like, for instance, in 1.6, that ramp box bug with the flashbang, for years we had to just kind of avoid it as competitors and not exploit a known bug, right?
Yep.
So I hope that that's not going to be the case. I hope that it's an easy fix. I'm not sure why it hasn't been identified in the very first round of patch notes. I hope to see it in the next round. But as far as the
I think
agents go,
sort of cut you off, but I believe the cipher cameras are patched in this patch as well.
oh, they are. Okay.
Hopefully.
Yes. Yep. Yeah.
Just wait for them to
they're
find
thank
some
God.
nuggets,
the
dude.
ones they
Just
know
wait.
about. The ones they know about have been patched.
Yep.
So
Okay.
at least that's
Okay,
what
thank
they called
God.
out in the patch notes. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because
The
like as a
exploits were really
player,
rough.
it's so hard to not use the exploits too, knowing that they're there, and it's also hard to
Yep.
get mad at someone for using it. But anyways, yeah, and I have to agree with you, Moses, as well. I don't think that the agents should be constantly changed or updated with, on a monthly or even 3-month, quarterly rate. I think that they should just be set in stone after the release, to be honest with you, and force the players to make answers and figure out how to make workarounds on the OP-ness of Sage, for instance.
Absolutely. There is such a thing as doing too much, as we've learned in other titles, and hopefully that this, at least for the initial goings, I can expect some rapid changes during the beta phase. But to your point, post-release, I hope that they really keep their minds about them and don't change things too rapidly or too often. Speaking of exploits, let's move on to the next topic where we are going to be covering the anti-cheat, something we talked about last week. Vanguard and updates. The Vanguard and updates have been a hot topic. Me personally, I'll lead off with this. I have been unable to play the game because of how the Vanguard anti-cheat works. It's been blocking critical drivers, other system software. It makes it so I can't even reboot my computer properly in some cases. We talked about the intrusiveness. I have no issue with an anti-cheat that goes the distance to prevent cheating in online games. But in my case specifically, I've been unable to play, and it's been a topic around the community a lot. They have been releasing hot fixes. What has been your experience with cheaters in your games? Since that was something we talked about last week, and you guys have been playing a lot since I've been unable to play. And do you think that the hot fixes and the way Vanguard works is appropriate considering what Valorant is trying to achieve here? Potter, let's start with you.
You know, my experience with cheaters has been fairly minimal. If I just think about the ratio of how many hours that I'm actually playing in a day and how many cheaters I actually run into, I would say that I hardly run into cheaters. But that's just been my experience. Now, while I'm in game, do I hear people constantly complaining about cheaters? Yes. Do I actually think that I run into a lot of cheaters? No. So I think there's two problems here is that yes, there are certainly cheaters out there for sure. There's no question about that. But I think that, you know, there is this culture in online gaming where if you just get completely owned, your very first excuse is going to be this motherfucker's cheating, you know? So, but
Yep,
nine
yep.
times out of 10, I found that they're usually not actually cheating. You just kind of got laid out and, you know, maybe your approach needs to be changed. So, I find that that's generally the bigger issue is that lower tier players or maybe just more casual players that aren't used to running into players that are very talented, uh, that tends to be the issue. For me personally, that's what I've seen and run into at the moment. And as far as the Vanguard goes, yeah, I agree with you, Moses. I have no problem with it being as intrusive as it is. If it's going to allow me a better playing experience with confidence, knowing that there are less cheaters out there. Now, how effective it is, I have no idea. I'm not very familiar with all of that.
I was at least when the game was launching, the anti-cheat was something I paid very close attention to, not because of how it works or anything like that. I don't really care how it works. It sounded like it was going to be awesome. Coming from a game like PUBG, where cheaters have been an issue for a long period of time, and really in any online space, especially in PC gaming, you're constantly going to be dealing with this battle between the developers and the cheat makers who are both trying to make money on in their respective
Yep.
fields. But I felt coming into Valorant the first week, and I'm like, I'm not going to see cheaters. Like they built this thing ground up. They got all this access. I heard all this cool stuff, and that has kind of altered. I don't really feel that same confidence. Pansy, did you feel that confidence coming out of the gate as well? And how do you feel that Riot has responded? Do you still feel that this anti-cheat endeavor that was supposed to be revolutionary is as advertised?
I think that they've realized that coming from a world of like League of Legends and that sort of thing, and then welcome to the FPS market, the cornerstone of every goddamn cheater in the world. It's a different landscape, right? When I first came into it, sure, I had high hopes, but I was also very, very cynical that this was going to be as robust as they said. But that's why I was super like happy with them. Take my bank details. I don't care. Whoever you are, Mister Riot, you can have all my information. You can see the weird shit I look at online. Like, you want to see the deep dive I went on last night on YouTube about urban explorers? Fine, go ahead. It's not that exciting, trust me. But the point is that I think they've walked into a space being very confident and they've had to have their sights adjusted, I think, because it genuinely is, as you said, a huge competition, right? Between the developers of an anti-cheat and those trying to get ahead of it. It's going to be a constant back and forth. As long as the only thing I really want from Riot is them to be transparent with the way they approach it to their own security's allowance, right? Because obviously you don't want to give away too much as to what you're doing, but be communicative, talk about it, tell people what you're doing to a degree, even if it's after the fact, like, saying that there's been a ban wave, cool, that actually helps people's kind of, paranoia get quelled, because as Potter said, right, so back in my mind, when I used to play games, you'd only play, like when I used to play competitively, you'd only play in like invite channels or private leagues or these sort of instances in like IRC where you'd know or be quite certain that the other team wasn't cheating, because as soon as in your mind you think someone's dodgy, you're going to write off everything that you should learn from as they're cheating, and you never get better, right? And it's a really bad mentality to have. So it's like I want to get back to that confidence in it working. So I feel like if I do lose, I'm going, okay, well, why did I lose that? Did I overpeak? Did I lose patience? Did I just fucking miss? Like whatever it is, I want to be able to learn from it rather than going, he's cheating. Like no one's better than me apparently, you know what I mean? But it's that mentality I want to come back, and I want Riot to stay talking about it, stay being very open about communicating that this is still an issue, but it's a working issue, right? They're on it.
You know, and I have to kind of disagree, as I have lost a couple of games in Valorant, and the only reason I can ever imagine me not able to win a video game is because of cheaters preventing me from doing so.
100%.
Looking at the, and you just mentioned we saw briefly there, the one thing that we kind of get when it comes to the wins on the other side of the fence, you know, you hear about cheaters, there's tons everywhere, but nothing better than seeing a big ban wave come in. And in this situation, at least judging from the quoted tweet on the bottom, 8,800 plus cheaters removed from the game in a ban wave. This is kind of the sad, or the, what's the word, marination or marinating way, where I guess they leave these cheats out there to function for a little while, allow people to jump on and say like, oh, it's working, well, let's jump on and try it. Let them kind of you know, play for a little while and then ban them all at once. That's a normal tactic. So you love to see that.
The best thing, right? Like, I just have to say, like, I really hope, right, at some point when they allow people to buy skins, like, with real money a lot of the times, and you can see the accounts that get banned when they have, like, 10 grand worth of skins. It was, like, my biggest joy in CS, right? You see this absolute dickhead with, like, all the best skins, and you see their Steam account just fucked, and it's like, that's what I need. That, like, little bit of justice. Just to... You've ruined my game, so I just want to make sure you know that you've lost out on a shitload of money you can't get back. Like, that to me is joy. Like, I just need to see that from the ban waves. If they could just include a couple screenshots, that'd make me super happy.
So this
I have a question for you, Moses.
Go ahead.
Oh shit.
Sorry. If you, okay, let's say you played 30 hours in 3 days, or 10 hours a day in 3 days, and you run into a cheater. So one cheater every 30 hours of gameplay. Is that considered too many cheaters, or is that considered rare in your mind?
In my mind, I think that would be probably man, I've been playing video games a long time, so to me that would be normal. I would be like, okay, like that. Yeah, I can.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be normal. I mean, it's gonna happen. It's a constant battle, and I think that's where sometimes this topic gets muddy. Is like, well, Riot said there was gonna be a perfectly functioning anti-cheat. Nothing is perfectly functioning. It doesn't exist, especially when it comes to online games where there's a dedicated market of high value, or it brings a high value if you're able to crack these things. And Valorant, and we said this last week, came out and said this thing is pristine, like it's revolutionary. And there's someone out there like, okay, challenge accepted. Let's see how revolutionary and pristine this thing is. And that was that. But looking at both sides of it, it's gonna be a battle. I just hope that the compatibility and realistically the free to play model isn't going to be an issue moving forward, because in CS, like you said, Lauren, you have skins you can lose. But in this case, if you get your account banned, all that means is you maybe have to buy a little bit more stuff if you want to come back. I want to see what they're doing with those bans. Are they hardware ID bans? What info are they collecting for those hardware? Like they have all this access with this kernel. I would love to, this kernel access rather, and I would love to see them like ban credit cards, ban IP addresses, MAC addresses, ban everything, man. Make it so they can't come back.
Put phone verification on it, please. Like, I really want phone verification on it. And let's say you do that, you get put against, like, let's say you don't have to. It's not a necessity. But like in CSGO, you get the trusted accounts. I want that in Valorant. So it's like, you know, someone's got that extra layer. Like, if you're cheating, sure, you could probably just buy a prepaid, you know, card. Sure, it can still be bypassed. But the more steps you put in front of someone trying to get a new account, the less likely you, who has been putting in the hours and, you know, you've got, you know, verified or whatever. I just want to see more social structure to it to actually stop these people being able to come back in easily. But again, as you said, like one cheater in 30 hours, I feel like you should be annoyed, but I really wouldn't be. I'd be like, that's one game, oh well. You know what I mean? Like I'll take that, you know?
Not to mention when if there is a situation where there's someone cheating in your game, they will nullify the results. I'm not sure if they'll be able to do that retroactively. That would be nice to see if they can go back and say like, yeah, there was a verified cheater in this game. It's been stricken from the record and your rank's been adjusted or whatever. I think that would be nice to see as well, especially if you're grinding rank and you're coming into that high elo where right now cheaters are a lot more prevalent. At least prior to this ban wave and Vanguard update. So we'll see in the next couple of weeks if that mood shifts. But what I want to talk about now, and I want to set the stage as we move into the next topic, which is tier 2 players from CSGO going to Valorant. We've got two of the preeminent minds from Counter-Strike, a ton of experience between the two of you. Let's talk about how now the question becomes, is it more viable for tier 2 players in Counter-Strike to go to Valorant? The question is the money. there's a ton of money in Counter-Strike. We know that, but it's very top heavy. Most of that cash is going to the Australises and all the SK, Navi, all these big top teams. And if you're not at that top level, if you're at that tier 2 level or potentially below, the money drops off in a hurry. The gold rush is over. And if you're a person like Freakazoid, Zealous, a lot of these guys we're not starting to see coming in, or we saw in Counter-Strike. Freakazoid was on Cloud9 recently, and now he's decided he wants to come over to Valorant. I'm going to let you guys go wild on this topic. I'm going to start with Potter.
Oof, this one is there's so many angles from this. I don't see a problem with it, especially from Freakazoid's standpoint, and even Zelsis. I mean, Zelsis is a younger CS:GO player, but he's been around the block, right? And I guess it just depends on your situation, and I think the majority of quote unquote tier 2 up and coming players should be on the younger side of things, should be on the more inexperienced side of things. So for them, their priority and focus shouldn't be org finding an organization, finding a way to make a living off this game. I don't think that that should be their priority. So if that is your priority and that's why you're shifting focus and going over to Valorant, sure, fine, see ya, you know. But I think it's really important to kind of identify where you're coming from, I guess. So again, if you're an up and coming player and you're tier 2 in CS:GO, you should definitely stay in CS:GO. I mean, especially with all these players leaving and it's going to open and create a lot more opportunities for you. Now, again, if you're looking to make a living off of it and that's why you're moving over to Valorant, then I guess it makes sense. That's my take on it.
I feel like you've got a lot of faith in the system to work, right? Like these tier 2 players, I mean, okay, to break into Flashpoint or EPL, let's say they're the most like credible source. Let's say specifically to like NA and I guess EU slightly, right? If you're not in that, I don't think you can look at this at a career level at all, right? As much as that sucks to say, that there is a very healthy tier 2 scene in CS:GO in the fact that it's got a lot of players, a lot of competition, but the money's not there. It's closed circuits, right? I think Ye put out a really good tweet longer. If you want to go check it out, like it's a perfect summary of what it's like. I think if you're not within that bracket, no matter where you're standing, and you like Valorant, right? It's not. Don't treat it like you're jumping ship. Don't be the rat, fleeting from the fire. If you like the game and you're willing to start from ground zero and build up with some decent foundations behind you, sure, do it. I see nothing wrong with it. I think it's the best option because CS right now is so top heavy. I mean, you look at the rarities who break in. I haven't really cast CS in maybe let's say like really been involved in like 2 years, arguably more, and I've been surprised by a couple of rosters. I've been surprised by Navi having a couple of names that I didn't know, for example, or Catchy. I'm going, oh, it's those guys. But I mean, as a scene collectively, the pillars don't shift very often, and it's for a good reason. They're the best in the world, right? They maintain their spots. But in A, it's even further locked down. I feel I feel like I rarely see this brand new talent being picked up and thrown in and able to shine. I feel like this is the perfect opportunity for people to actually build on it, right? And any of the fans who sit there and say, "Oh, that's a bad choice," or "You're selling out," you're fucking stupid. These guys have spent like, do you know how hard they've had to work to get fucking nowhere in CS? Basically, it's like these guys every day. Or work, get up and grind, like, and maybe you get noticed. Maybe you're the exception and not the rule, right? Like, there's a few standout cases, but like, I want these players to do well, and I think if they've got the mentality to get that far in CS and then hit that ceiling that's so hard to break through, fucking jump ship, dude. Get over to Valorant and grind it out, do it again. If you have the chops for it, though, you know what I mean? Like, you're starting afresh in a brand new game. You've got to be, able to grind so hard. I don't think any other game in the world right now has such an established heavy top scene, right? Like every other game, I feel like Overwatch especially is just like fucking filter through them, pick another player up, who cares? League of Legends, you'll get a couple new players coming in, all these other scenes. But if you've watched CS, I mean, you can still see Get Right and Forest. You know what I mean? Like these guys are still around, arguably not the best in the world, sure, but they're there, right? So it's like, fuck, I hope these younger players get a chance at breaking in at ground level, because most of them weren't even born when CS was actually building those blocks,
And looking at the CS landscape, and you nailed something that I think is super important in any competitive environment, is that you can work as hard. You can be the best player in your community. You can be the best player in your league. and that will eventually, depending on how high you're able to travel, that could lead to nothing. And Valorant, having people come over from tier 2 CSGO, these are like Freakazoid, these are all guys, Zelsis, these are guys who have been around during the gold rush and maybe are seeing the grass potentially being greener. It's the new hot product. They could come in, make a splash early, bring their talents over. Do you think that that is going to that potential lead in the mechanics aspect, being a top level CS player, obviously will give you an advantage really in any shooter? But do you think that the bad habits, and Ye mentioned this in his tweet as well, do you think that the bad habits of CS players, specifically like crouching all the time, that kind of thing, that was an issue as well? Do you think that they will eventually be overtaken once again by the quote unquote pure Valorant player, the person that started playing Valorant from the beginning, doesn't have any other experience, that 13-year-old kid nobody knows about yet? How long is this advantage going to last? I'm going to put that one to Potter.
You know, that's a really great question. And I think it's going to last quite some time, because even if we think of CSGO, now we're seeing the new flair of, that 16-year-old aim, and there's a new wave of Counter-Strike players. And sure, I mean, Lauren just mentioned the old guard and Get Right and Forest. They're still relevant. They could still be top 10, a top 10 team in the world, but that new wave, that pure CSGO player, they're the players that are just kind of taking over, the simples, the ROPs, the players that didn't transition from source or 1.6 and just purely just made their name for themselves in CSGO. I think we're going to see that exactly in Valorant as well. So Freakazoid, he's going to bring those fundamentals over to Valorant, and he's going to find success 100%, because the games are way too similar not to be able to have those fundamentals kind of carry over into this game. But man, I'm already seeing it, just those pure aimers, the I hate to say jet players, but even jet players in a
Jet
few
mains,
months,
dude.
I
Jet
think
mains, straight up.
those
hit
jet
rate, by the
mains,
way.
dude. Those jet mains, they're gonna be there some way, somehow, creatively speaking. They're going to, a pure Valorant player, he's gonna make it work, and I'm excited to see when that happens. But I think it's gonna be quite some time before it actually happens.
Yeah, I
Thoughts on
mean,
that,
like, I
Mandy?
just want to highlight, just because, like, you look at Simple being probably the best example of it, right? He is like the success story. I guess you could look at Rops as well. Like, you mentioned two really good examples of like the younger talent. I mean, the thing is, like, you think about the hoops he had to jump through just to get that shot, right? Like, you think of like a harder scene to get into, the CIS Counter-Strike scene of, like, the long-term god tier players, like classics from 1.6, who are arguably the best in the world. Like, you can debate that amongst yourselves, but they certainly were up there. I mean, it took him how many years? So how long has CS:GO been out? Like, I mean, it
2014,
was
right?
something ridiculous. I mean, it took him that many
2012.
years to go from, like, even longer, right? So it's like it took him that long to go from being this like superstar kind of like puggy style aimer, like this kind of FPL highlight piece, that everyone's kind of looking going, well, when's he going to get picked up? When does he slot in? And then how long did it take him to go from being that kind of firecracker player that everyone saw the potential on to being a viable person to put into a structured team? Because these aim stars, these kind of pug kids who come up and they're nuts, when you put them into a team that's like, structured, you need like it takes a different skill set. Like, how long does that take to then transition, right? It's like that's another maybe year or two until they can incorporate that kind of super aim heavy, very kind of exciting flair into a structured team. It's very easy to be the one-man star when you can play around just yourself, not the whole roster. So I think there's definitely going to be time where it does obviously switch over to that young blood, and I'm excited for it, because you get to see a whole new world of games, right? They're just thoroughbreds in Valorant. But before that, of course, I mean, Taz and Neo looks like so good in Europe right now as some of like the better players coming through. Like they look kind of snappier than most. So I'm hyped for it. I want to see when the kind of CS giants get dethroned, right? Because that's when you get your next Simple. That's when you get your next like Rops come up and everyone goes, who the hell is this kid, right? Like that's the exciting part.
And right now, Valorant doesn't have that central system, the farm system, as Scott likes to put it. The farm system in CS is like this, forged with fire. Like if you can rise above all of the levels you have to get through to get to even near that tier 2 level in Counter-Strike, you're going to have a ton of practice experience. And I think that's something that these guys will be bringing over is that the ability to practice. That, you know, ability in game is one thing, but knowing what it takes to get there, a lot of people don't discover that, and they might even have the appetite for it until they've attempted it at least once or twice. And I think that we will see some CS:GO dominant level competition, at least until that farm system comes and either through Riot or through third party becomes as competitive and as large as the CS scene. It's going to take a while, but I want to move on. I want to move on to the next topic, which is a community spotlight. We've been seeing a lot of these little tips and tricks videos coming out on Reddit. I love guide content. I've dabbled in it myself, and this is the type of stuff that we see probably getting patched out in some cases. But let's just run through this. Has there been any tips, or actually, I'll put it to you guys. What have been some of your secrets or to success on your specific characters as we look through these?
Why would I give it away, dude? why am I doing it for free? I don't even get the internet points for it.
What rank are you right now? Plat 2? Potter, let's hear your tips.
This game. I've been casting PUBG. I'm that good. I don't even need to play the game. I just talk about it and people believe me.
Yeah. Easy peasy.
My tips, you know, I really like the left alt tip, and I also what I always constantly remind players in my ranked games is when you're not looking at a high traffic choke point, look at your minimap, because that'll tell you. The minimap in Valorant is so insane. The amount of information that it gives you and how clear it is, I think. I really like this minimap in Valorant, and I think a
Yeah.
lot more up and coming players, especially like I hate to bag on Overwatch players, but these Overwatch players, man, like it's just a different style of FPS, I think,
Yep.
that they're just not quite used to. And so their fundamentals are just so different than a CS:GO player's fundamentals are. And I think it's blatantly obvious that CS:GO fundamentals are just a lot more applicable to this Valorant game than Overwatch fundamentals are going to be. So yeah, I think the minimap, I think a lot more players need to just utilize the minimap, especially when it's those quiet zones when you're staring into a wall waiting for some action to happen. Like just because it'll allow you to over rotate just so much more comfortably within these rounds.
See, I think this is nice though. Like most CS players go, yeah, I know what a jiggle peek is. Yeah, I know how to kind of just AD around. You know what I mean? Like it's the basics. And this is probably the one that I was actually doing. I put it on Twitter a while back. The bait on the teleport with Omen. Like I kind of just like pug on NA with my friends at like a much lower rank, and it's like you get time to mess around with that. But I think it's something where if you're a CS player, a lot of this stuff is very intuitive and like very much drilled into your brain. And I say CS, I don't just mean CS, like search and destroy players or kind of objective players like this, where you plant a bomb on a site somewhere, right? It's very much drilled into your head. If you've ever gotten semi good at it or competitive, a lot of these things are very, very like basic to you. But considering players haven't come from that, some of these things like can really change people's games. Even just understanding where like the choke points are, how to exploit them. Like why do I care if I take mid control? Like some people just do it because they've seen it, right? Like they think, oh, okay, this is what I should do. But they don't understand why they're doing it. I think it's kind of cool to show that. And people are theory crafting and this sort of stuff, right? Like I hate this guy. Like, who cares about your shitty lineups?
Stop putting this out
look
there,
at that
please,
great bit of information.
For the love of God.
No,
we don't need all the people
so
knowing
much.
the Sova arrows.
Exactly. It's like it's so obnoxious.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Like
the thing is, as well,
like
I came from a game that had similar stuff to this. Like I came from like originally enemy territory, which had a grenade launcher, like a little rocket launcher, a little rifle gun that you could shoot it with, and it's exactly the same thing. And I've always loved that people go out of their way and find these cool little nerdy things, and it builds a community, right?
And the tools, I think that Valorant's hype, and now we start to see these community tools coming out. This reminds me of I'm not sure what site my camera's blocking it, but this reminds me of like Gosu. You know, they have all these different analytics. That's what I'm super interested in seeing, is when the data starts coming out, when we have the API connected tools that show you all these different options that you can run. And once the analytics and maybe giving some room for some coaches to come in, we have head coaches coming in from CS:GO and giving them those tools and the amount of information you can get a demo system, all these stuff. I hope those come really, really soon. But for now, we have to chuck it over to a quick commercial break as we. Oh, there's an economic guide for those getting ready to go as well. When we come back, we're diving deep into the esports side of things as we go over the Fnatic Open results as well as the T1 Invitational results, and we are going to go real deep with Pansy and Potter on Haven as we dive into some gameplay footage there. So when we come back, we'll jump into that. We'll see you guys real soon. Welcome back. Thanks for waiting. We're back with Pansy and Potter, and we are jumping into this week's results in the esports department in Valorant. We had the T1 Invitational as well as the Fnatic Open, and what I wanted to start with now is the results of the Fnatic Open and the agent pick rates. This is something that we were talking about data in the last segment. This is what I'm interested in seeing. Who's getting picked? And you can see it right out of the gate, 100% Sage, 100% Cypher. This is on the previous patch, not the one that came out today, obviously. But what stands out to you here, Potter? This is a Sage main talking, by the way. 100% Sage picks and Cypher as well, two of the strongest agents in the game.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it makes complete sense, right? These are the two players that up until now have had the strongest utility, the strongest kit to be able to slow down any opponents that, it made rushing any sort of a site null and void. I mean, there was no rushes to be found, and it's solely because of these two agents. So I think it makes complete sense to see them in every top tier composition. Moving forward, though, I mean, I wonder how much that's going to change, especially with these nerfs coming in.
Looking on the other end of the spectrum, 0% pick rates for Jett and Phoenix. A bit of a foreshadowing to the T1 Invitational that we'll talk about in a little bit. Jett has kind of been the premier she was the character.
Jett
she was like the
mains.
tracer. Yeah, Jett mains. So she was like the tracer in this situation where she was on all the promo posters. Her kit was flashy. When the game first came out, she was like the playmaker kind of. Let's call her the flash, the glass cannon, whatever you want to call it. The Phoenix is a little bit of an interesting one as well. I believe his kit's a little bit better. How do you think that Jett and Phoenix with 0% pick rates maybe even fit into competitive at all at this stage, Pansy?
I think Phoenix can still fit in. I think that sadly for him, Breach is just a better pick, right? I think he's just been superseded by someone who has a more reliable kit, and it's just how it goes. I'm kind of glad to see Jett being on 0%. I would actually like to see Omen and Viper slightly higher, personally, just because I think those two can be viable in the right maps. And if teams now actually start playing as a 5 and they practice, you can definitely use that as your flex pick. I think Omen, especially after these buffs, now could even be arguably on, I don't want to say on par with Brimstone, but I think you could create some fun things between them. His smokes are far more viable. He has a little blind / flash, whatever you want to call it. These sort of pieces, the off angles he can get, his kits become way more viable. Viper as well has the wall. She's got some set lineups. I mean, they're far more viable. And I think once the kind of, I guess, gloss of Raze being the new one coming in and being that OP one with the nade and the ult, I think their utility kit should actually start shining a little higher. If we saw more split in competition, I think you'd see more of potentially Omen and Viper maybe being picks on this, because one, the TP on Omen could be super strong just to cost, the rotations, because again, that map is all about exploiting them, in my opinion. And Viper's wall is incredibly viable there, and her, the little puddle of mess that she makes. I don't know what it's called. I don't play Viper. But I mean, everyone's seen the Forzen clip. Everyone's seen the Forzen clip of his lineup. Literally, you put the spike down, you sit 10 miles away from the site, and you just yeet it at it, and you get kills, right? You can't defuse on it. So there's going to be some quirky picks, I think, in the future. Right now, people are just playing what's safe and what's comfortable, and I think that's the right thing to do in competitions, right? It's going to take one team to show how viable these other options are, and we haven't seen it yet, and we have seen a couple of flex picks, but I'm hoping we see more. But for now, people are playing it safe and playing it smart, right?
Talking about composition, this was the far and away the most popular picks in the Fnatic Open, and this is interesting to see again. Sage and Cypher, 100% pick rate. They're going to be there obviously as well. Brimstone and Breach as well as Raze being the most popular lineup. Raze's ultimate, I think, is the reason why we're still seeing the pick rate so high. Still a very powerful ultimate, can change the tide of a round, and one round can change the tide of a game. So to see her up there, I think that's really around the ultimate. And then the other two characters are they just better than their nearest alternative? So Brimstone, in this situation, at least prior to the patch that just came out today, a bit better of an option for his utility than Omen, and Breach just does a better job than Phoenix at the entry. His kit's better. He's got more activity, and he's got the stuns, and his ultimate's excellent as well. So obviously, Breach is going to be the go-to there, in my opinion, having played a lot of Breach. Potter, looking down at the rest of the compositions, what do you think is the strength and weaknesses, keeping the current patch notes in mind moving forward? Do you think we're going to see a little bit more of a change up in the alternate lineups that maybe are not going to fall in line with the most popular lineup we see at the top there?
I guess Sova. I think Sova is not wasn't at the top there if I saw correctly, and I think Sova's kit is just insane right now. I think players who probably one trick Sova and are getting really good with her or him, it's going to
Mm,
create a lot of opportunities for teams, and you're already seeing it now. I think there's just so many
yep.
clever ways that you can approach the attacking side with Sova's kit. So I'm excited to see exactly where that leads, and also even retaking sites with Sova's kit. It provides so many more opportunities for you,
Yeah.
even in those rounds where you think it's an impossible situation. So, yeah, I'm excited to see Sova.
I think that echoing on from that, you look at Genji's composition here, it's the perfect balance. I think I was a little bit curious if we were going to see the double info kind of players, right? You have your Cypher and your Sova in play. And we saw it, and it works incredibly well. I think it's a really good, I guess, treating that as your flex pick would be the best way to look at it in my eyes. I think then the roll of the dice comes in. Do you go for Sova, or do you go for an Omen potentially after these changes? Or, you know what I mean? Like, that becomes the discussion point. I think things like Phoenix are just he's just not there for me. Unless you're going to be cheesing it, kind of bullshitting on his walls, which I hope none of these players would do. Right? They're competitive players. They shouldn't be doing that. So it's like I just don't see him being as viable. I honestly was very surprised that Brax's team went for that composition, because I remember it was like Hiko and people like that who put Breach in the spotlight. They were seeming to like really understand what these compositions could do and these agents could really bring to the forefront. And then they kind of make these weird choices that I think really hindered them against a team who understood what these compositions can create. So I was a little surprised to see them kind of lacking on that and maybe slipping a little bit there, and making errors that clearly cost them potentially the tournament. I don't want to say it's the main cause, because obviously you still have to just click heads, right? At the end of the day, ideally that's the end line. But I mean, having that composition to kind of give you that step up is meant to be an assisting factor, and I think they kind of hindered themselves there.
Absolutely, and I mean the team play potential with Breach, even at a medium to high level. If you have someone who knows how to time pushes with Breach's utility, way better than Phoenix, way better. Like, it's not even
Yep.
close, especially with the shocks and the ults and everything that comes in. I think
And
that
it's
Breach.
safe.
I'm surprised that Breach honestly has kind of skated the. He did have his utility cost adjusted in this patch, which might affect him a little bit just in the economy sense. But I think Breach is going to be that player that once we see like that golden Breach god, whoever decides to make him the main character or whatever, is going to be just insane. So I would expect to see more Breach changes in the future, depending on how his pick rate continues to be elevated. But looking at the results and the looking at the T1 Invitational, I wanted to talk a little bit about Gen G, who they signed their team. This is a squad of maybe not as illustrious as the Sinatras of the world, who got a lot of press last week, but they did not drop a single game until the grand finals of the T1 Invitational. They rolled through competition, including Mouse Spaz, comprised of entirely recently pro Counter-Strike players. That's Cutlers, Hayes, Wardell, Sabrosa, and Drone. I guess arguably tier 2 players, but still very high pedigree in this squad. But Gen G rolled through and won it against Team Brax, who did take a game on them, but that was a very impressive showing by Gen G.
I mean, I was kind of surprised in a way. I think that we're starting to see if anyone's resting on their laurels, these players are going to come up and just kind of catch you out, right? I think everyone was sat there, and I say everyone. I hate to say it, but like the fan base at the moment is gonna just back the streamer they like the most. Everyone likes Brax's storylines, of course. In their eyes, he's the best player in the game. You know, Skadoodle's the guy who played with Shroud for a while, and now he's really good as well. He did the good thing in NA and got them the major, right? Like, so the audience is gonna sit there and always kind of overhype these players a little bit, but in their own right, they were phenomenal and they have been phenomenal. They've set the pace. But I'm glad to see a challenger. I think again, to me, AZK has been, you know, a supreme player for the Brax team, you know, for T1, whatever they want to kind of call themselves. But he didn't get the attention from it, whereas the others did. But I'm happy to see variety. This is where you get to see the fun things happening, where it's just like everyone expects X, Y, and Z to win it, and suddenly here's your challenger. You guys aren't untouchable, and the audience is all surprised and shocked. It's like when Dizzy's team won a tournament against these guys or picked up a game. It's like, of course it's going to happen. Just because you see them stomping pubs constantly, it does not equate to the same sort of thing. So it's good for the competitive scene, and it's good to see them running, you know, on meta compositions, proving that it is very viable. Nice work, AZK, on that little slow orb there. But no, overall, it's good for the scene. It's good for the competitive nature.
Not to mention 100% Canadian lineup. Is this now, Potter, where we see Canada overtake esports? And this has nothing to do with my nationality, and I'm not pumping this question to you to make myself feel better about Canadian esports.
Oh, Canada. No,
Exactly.
yeah, surely. I mean, yeah, a new game like this, it always creates more and more opportunities, right? And I'm glad to see that Lauren still threw AZK under the bus for that for the slow orb, just calling him out right away in that video.
Poor
Poor
AZK.
Okay.
AZK, poor
What is this?
Kevin.
Is this like Sage Mains United? What is this?
Yeah, of course.
Got it.
So
I
on
understand
the flip side, on the lower bracket, there's an interesting storyline that I thought would be a nice tie into last week's discussion about Sentinels. Team Shroud unfortunately did go down into the lower bracket after losing to the team of Mouse Spaz, including Cutler Hayes, the gentleman I was talking about. But they ended up going against the Sentinels as well, who lost to Team Brax in the semifinals. And well, we'll call it what it is, a former, like a high level, but still a streamer team took down the new Sentinels roster, the one that got all this press, Sinatra coming, the former Overwatch, MVP of the league, losing in the semifinals of the T1 Invitational. Thoughts on that, Pansy?
feels bad, man. I mean, the Overwatch like fan base are trying to hold on to something, man. Their game's looking real rough right now. Their players are leaving. They're like, all right, we can support the Sentinels. It'll be fine. We Sinatra's right there. We'll be good. Nope. Get absolutely dumpstered by a Mixer streamer. I mean, it feels rough. You know what I mean? But
a Mixer streamer. Right? That's what we're boiling down. One of the best video game players ever to play. He's on Mixer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how it goes, right? We weren't even talking about Ninja. Feels good. No, I mean, the thing is, like, what do you expect to happen? It's going to take time. Brax's squad, yeah, they probably weren't at full strength throughout this as well. You know, argue for that what you want. Like, but the point is, the Sentinels, they'll still be a new roster. They're still working it out. I mean, you still got to look at the CS players of having the pillars of foundation when it comes to this sort of thing. And for Overwatch players, it's a whole new skill set. They're all incredibly talented, and I think it's stupid to deny that, but they don't necessarily have the same depth of adjusting capabilities. Like every CS player knows how to kind of, well, not every, a lot of the good CS players will be able to look at a situation
relax
and
there,
know
Lauren.
what can work for them. Yeah, I was being too nice. Sorry, I was hyping it up, dude. But no, I mean, like the thing is that a lot of them will have like the kind of playbook in their heads of, okay, well, this isn't working. We know what to do. And even boiling it down to like, what does doing this default mean? What happens when we just do this contact to the site? Like super basic stuff. But just boiling it down to that, they'll have that in their heads. So they should have some of the answers that some of these teams don't quite have yet from other games. But I mean, if they're already competing at semifinal levels, you're seeing that kind of big margin that everyone was saying sitting with CS players was going to have already slightly dissipating. It's a good sign. It's a good sign that they're not winning yet. I think that kind of looks right. But they're getting to semifinals and they're pushing. You know, they're looking like that's the area where they're at right now. That's not a bad thing. It takes time to get better than that and push further than that. It's still early.
But also,
Absolutely.
I think it takes time to learn a completely new game as well. And I caught a little bit of Sinatra's stream, and just watching him play, you could completely tell that he was a little bit out of his depth in a lot of scenarios. And I
Hmm.
think I'm very excited though to see the rate of progress that he's actually going to have, because obviously the kid has a lot of talent for gaming in general. So I'm
Yeah.
curious to see how fast he's going to be able to adapt to this new style of FPS that's so different than Overwatch itself.
I think
Yeah.
the mechanics aspect, especially when you're playing against top level CS talent, or at least a tier 2 and above CS talent, it's going to be rough. Overwatch, like you just mentioned, completely different style of game. MVP of the league. It's again goes back to what I was mentioning about the regimen of being able to practice, being able to understand, analyze, be objective, and learn. And I think a young guy, obviously, has got his whole gaming career still ahead of him,
Yeah.
and especially coming into Valorant is going to
I
be it's
just
going to be a learning process. And I
yeah.
suppose I'll put this to you, Pansy. Do you believe that this tournament, considering the rosters involved, is a better indicator of the I guess is this a good compass as to who a top team in North America would look like? It's an invitational, but is this a worthwhile tournament to kind of etch into the scorecard for these guys?
It's a marker, it's a waypoint. I don't think it's a true showing of who's out there. I think because they're all invitationals, it's very hard to get the understanding of the scene. And I think there's gonna be pretty better collectives as a set of five than what we're seeing right now. I mean, if you play at higher elo, I'm sure you've run into people you've never heard of, and you're like, wait, who the hell is this just trouncing everyone? And it's gonna be a while until we see the true competitive teams come through beyond the streamers, right? That's no discredit to any of them. It's just how it is, right? It's very easy to look and go, well, Breck, Shroud, Skadoodle, XYZ, they're the top tier players. They're exceedingly good, but are they the best five lock right now? I don't know. Like until there's an actual, big bracket competition, huge run through, not just best of ones, like actually a real competitive game, you're not going to know, and it's going to take a little bit of time. And I'm happy to see that. I think that's the thing for me is like, and actually someone in chat brought up a point. They're like, well, Sinatra's played CS before, yeah, but in playing like individually and playing like in Face at ESEA, puggy style things does not give you the mentality of a competitive team, even if it's to like a less relevant standard. It's gonna be very different. He might be able to pick up the mechanics quickly, but as said, like Potter, when you saw him in certain situations, he definitely won't have that instant fallback mentality. And once they get that, that's great. Then you can see these players coming up. But I think that's why for the first bit of time, I'm taking everything with a pinch of salt. These invitationals are who's the big streamer, who's the influencer, who's the person kind of at the flagship of representing this game to a large audience, who's going to get us the viewers, which is fine. I mean, that's what you got to do, right? You're putting money on the line for viewers at the moment. Until we see the competitive aspect coming through, I think pinch yourself with everything, right? It's that moment when we see it in a big tournament. That's when I start really paying attention. I think honestly, the European side of things has at least had a couple more non just invitationals going on where it's been, well, here's a couple of invites, but this is also open bracket. So I think we're seeing a couple of other teams maybe getting people's attention over there.
The reason, and one of the reasons I should say, we have you guys here. We got some analysts. Okay, we got Pansy. She's done a lot of casting. Otter, we've got you with your analytical skills, and I wanted to take one of those segments and actually and have you guys go deep dive. We talked about this in the pre-show. We want to watch some of this Haven cut gameplay from the T1 Invitational. I want to focus in on Gen G and Haven, and I'm going to let you guys go wild on this thing. Go in depth with the analysis. I'm excited to hear what you guys have to say.
I mean, just to kick it off, it's like I've seen this clip. I've managed to have a look through it. I think it's just like the synergy of the execution and Potter. Like we can look about the composition on this, right, with Brax, and this was when they had the Phoenix, and I think we're going to see like on that roster, right? Like the big thing to me that stands out, and I'm sure you're probably somewhat the same. Who's doing the flashes? Who's doing these set pieces for their attack inside? They're on defense here, and they still get run over. But like on a map like this, you need set pieces. Like what is their plan on the attack? I'm kind of curious what their theory was here.
And
Yeah,
this is the
exactly.
last
And
round of the
you
game too.
Yeah, and you mentioned it, Lauren, is the fact that they were missing smokes and just the kit itself didn't really enable them to win. And it's Phoenix's ult. It can be a little underwhelming, especially when you're down numbers, especially when you're not the aggressor. And you can see that they're on the defensive end here, and I believe the attackers they do actually end up B, and I think that's
Yeah,
generally
it's a mid
a lot
take.
of teams' game plans. Yeah, is where you just end up B, you wall off the right side of the site, and I think B is one of those sites that just it's hit or miss. You either give it up completely, or you're willing to defend it and ride or die for that site. But i- again, it's just one of those things where it's just going to constantly evolve and constantly change on depending on what teams are willing to give up.
Yeah, I'm looking at it now, and it's like, okay, retake time. We have how many ultimates up there? I think Brax might have had his ult then. I'm not 100% sure, but he's already been picked up trying to flank. It just feels super disjointed. Watching Gen G play this, like that set piece on the side take is clearly pretty well constructed. But, when you're in a 4v5, 5v5 retake, it's so messy, and they're picking up nothing from it at the moment. It's just like the ultimate being left there on Brimstone as well, just is just the icing on the cake. And look at the amount of utility that Gen G has to slow it down, right? Like that whole roster has everything. The Molotov there. It's like composition wise, or like pound for pound. You look at the players. I'd put obviously Brax's team being pound for pound as aimers probably higher than Gen G's personally. I mean, that's just my hot take on that. You look at utility usage and what the correct agents in my mind allow you is it gives you so much more room to kind of utilize on retakes, post plant holds, getting you on the site, getting you off the site. I mean, I know it's kind of almost backwards to some CS mentalities. Like getting on the site is all the strategy, holding it is then the aim. But here, there's so much more utility. So
For
I feel like this is an area of a pick, right?
Especially also, I mean, you just saw that the entirety of the team went forward to try to bait the defuse, put the wall up, but they didn't consider the fact that the brimstone ult was there. So, but in a couple more weeks, when teams and players are a lot more aware of what ultis are available, and it's more practiced into their regimen of retaking sites, or vice versa, where they're taking over sites. So I think you're going to see a bait in the future. Throwing utility but not going into the site, drawing out that brimstone ulti first, and then actually trying to go over for the retake. So I think this retake here, you could see just how discombobulated it is, but I think that's to be expected, right? Of teams and players not being as practiced on exactly how they want to approach this retake scenario.
Yeah, I think the one thing for me is I think what you said about then is baiting out utility. The amount of times like I'll play like a pug or something and explaining to people how valuable it is just to get out, like Sage's, slows, like pulling utility away early is super, super valuable. And if you had maybe a brimstone or something to buy you some time in middle to cost the attacking side a little bit more of that utility, make it work, have to work a little bit harder, could have been pretty viable then. I was kind of hoping to see more. As I said, I was a little bit, I don't want to say disappointed because it's a great scoreline. 11 to 12 is super exciting, super competitive. But I feel like you see the downfalls here and there of like certain picks coming in. But again, you can't ever take anything away from the individual power that comes from Brax's side. They're great, great players, but I think there's going to become a point where you can't just be, just get your gun out and aim, right? It's going to have to boil away from that. And I was surprised to see it because I'd given them a lot of credit in my mind that they're a team that were quite quick on the evolution of how they wanted to play. They were picking up like nice picks there. So I think this is, I don't want to say an anomaly. I think we've seen them being challenged for the first time, which is super exciting. Beyond it being just like another pug that's just like either out aimed them. So we're starting to see like teams with set pieces, set hits. I think everyone's got the basics down, but this looked quite well constructed for like post plant scenarios. So yeah, I mean, for me, again, I think this is just a wake up call to some of the players who've been kind of cruising in pug mode that we might now start seeing a little bit more stratted, attacks and plays coming out. So it's good fun to watch.
Looking at the way this round played out, and you kind of nailed it. This is a close game. It's 12-11. It's one round away from a forced overtime. After a long day of playing as well. Not to really put the blame on anybody, but in a close game like this, and having watched the gameplay back a few times, and having seen the results of the tournament, we talked a little bit about the Phoenix pick earlier. Do you think there was anything that the Team Brax could have done, at least in this game or this specific round, that might have given them a little bit more of a chance to win?
I don't think it's necessarily. You know what? It's not even necessarily a bad pick. It's just like I'm someone who plays Brimstone, right? So I'm always going to say buying time and being able to kind of control the pace of the game is incredibly important and super viable, even on defense. Even though you're not setting the pace yourself, technically, you can try and adjust it as a defensive standpoint. Not having that can be rough. I mean, who's playing middle? I think you got AZK kind of holding mid, which is completely fine. They're playing retake on B. I would have, again, I just like to see a little bit more of a switch up. I don't like seeing the double stack on C, but this could be something they've been conditioned to do throughout this tournament. I'd have preferred to see maybe, you know, your Cypher soloing C or soloing A, whichever one, and then you can kind of bolster that retake towards middle. I think it's more just how they played it, even though their agents certainly didn't help them here.
Yeah, the Brimstone, or sorry, excuse me, the Breach and Phoenix combo just kind of stands out to me. I would love to know the mentality there as to why they wanted to go, if it was specifically for the Phoenix ult or having that extra aggressive utility, whatever you wanted to frame it. But you kind of hit the nail on the head. Not having those Brimstone smokes, the slows that would be required. I can see Brimstone smokes going down right at this stage here. At any point, and not having that omen either is just left them so open, and it's difficult. It's such a close game, and it's one round as well.
Yeah.
So to break it open and try and say that anything was done wrong is not for me to say. But Potter, I'm interested to know, looking at the compositions and the scope of the tournament. Do you think that this was an experimentation, or do you think that this was an intentional counterplay to what Gen G was doing?
I think that it was probably a mixture of both, right? I mean, because this was at the grand final stage, and from what I understand, they were running a specific composition, and prior to this, and then in the finals, they decided to switch it up and bring that Phoenix out. So I imagine that they just wanted to frag out, right? I think when you pick Phoenix, his
Yep.
kit, yeah, sure, it is really nice, but it's really nice for one thing and one thing only, and that is finding duels, figuring out where you want to fight, and having that Phoenix just entry it up, right? And trying to utilize that ulti to have a free entry without dying. So I think that was probably their goal and focus, but when the match gets that close and you start losing rounds and the rounds become a lot more important, then making riskier plays just because you have an agent becomes a lot more difficult. So I think that's probably one of the positions that they were kind of forced to be in. So even in that round itself, you saw Brax, he was towards those doors on Garage. He double flashed out, but he decides to back up. And not only does he decide to back up, he didn't have a mate with him to try to trade his aggression or try to capitalize on whatever map space that he was trying to get himself. So it was discombobulated in their approach, not only with the Phoenix pick, but also with how they wanted to approach how to capitalize on the Phoenix pick itself.
We've been talking a lot about Team Brax, but they didn't win the tournament. Gen G did. So looking at Gen G now as a squad, this is a team that did take the tournament. And does that kind of put them now? They're a signed team. They've won a tournament, a decent size one of that. And in the current landscape, does that elevate them now to a position, in your opinion, that puts them in like a top 5, top 10 team situation, or even the best?
I mean, I can't yet. It's too early. That's the thing. Like I think NA is very hard to get a grip on yet because it's super invitationally based. It's kind of like, let's get these guys in. I want, if they can repeat this and have some back-to-back results looking that strong, clearly they're very good. They're very much towards the top end of the scene. I want like an open bracket tournament where they have to play it through. Yeah, sure, give them like the second or third round so they don't have to fight through the groups, but I want to see a bit more from them. I think everyone knows that they are extremely talented, but it's just I want to see how far they can go against, not just your same 3 teams, 4 teams that we've seen now. Give them let the audience have a crack at them. That's when you can really start working out if they really are setting the pace at the moment.
Drop them into an open
I have to agree
tournament and
as
see how they
well.
do.
Yeah, but also we have to keep in mind, I mean, the amount of hours that everyone is kind of dedicating to this game and how many
Mhm.
players are grinding. It's impressive that they actually pulled this through though and won it out versus everyone who's putting in 15 plus hours a day and,
Yeah,
and they happen to be
yeah.
the players that come out on top. I mean, these are like tier 3, tier 4 Counter-Strike players that have come in and kind of just stolen the show a little bit, I gotta say.
Yep.
Looking at the Fnatic tournament, the other tournament that was ongoing as we move on, looking at the structure of this one, this was a mix of open and invited teams with eventually Team Prodigy, comprising of some familiar names, taking the overall tournament against 2G4L
Yeah.
in the ultimate final. And I think this was a little bit more of you know, talking with what Potter was just mentioning. It was an invited structure in the T1 Invitational. This one had some open components, and
Hell yeah.
with essentially a CS team taking the final. Some standouts there. Defran, obviously a former pro Overwatch player. Scream Mixwell should be known to you if you follow CS at all. Shaiko and King Mezzi don't stand out to me personally. Just I don't follow the scene that closely, but I do see a G2 logo there, I believe. I can't quite tell on that jersey, but what was your initial takeaways from this open tournament, semi-open tournament, I should say?
Me jumping into it, I think this is the first look at a wider scene of players and players that I'm super happy to see. The team up against them is someone that I've known for pretty like 10 plus years. It's the Finnish team, the 2G4L, whatever that stupid ass name is. You have Alexi, you have Replan, Cinder, Fake. These guys are COD 4 players. They were quite late at the end of the COD 4 cycle, but they were incredibly good. They were, you know, the thoroughbreds that came through that weren't part of COD 2, that weren't part of COD 1. They weren't like the first guys in the scene, but they grounded it out. They really did come up with it, and then they went on to Battalion. They've basically been in any other game than Overwatch and CS. They didn't seem to suit their playstyle. It didn't seem to work with them, but this seems better. And they're an incredibly good bunch. They had a shit final game, to be fair. They got steamrolled, but they're the type of players that I'm looking out for that people maybe won't know, but they are incredibly good players. Outside of that, in this, you had Existence and Maniac and started from CS. You had Tivik and Taimu playing as well. And Taimu's one of those players that got to fame through Overwatch, but actually he was great in Dirty Bomb and other games that are like, again, not your mainstays, but he was, I remember watching him play in a game. He's, again, Finnish. It's all these young Finns that are just ridiculous. He was in a game of Dirty Bomb with me, and I literally said to the devs, he's either cheating or he's going to be, you know, one of the best in this game, and he was. It was like one of the two, is that coin flip. So he's, again, a super talented player. You had Pitt playing for Trauma in there, and considering he was one of the big CS players that left the scene, right, who's kind of gone over, they bowed out pretty early. Sliggy was playing in it. You had just like a couple of decent names starting to come through of like, you know, the wider scene, right? Just not just like, here's your ex-CS players in a mix, or here's your ex, you know, Overwatch players in a mix. It was like, oh, here's a bit of a more of a jumble of players. So you're starting to see a bit more of a traditional, you know, open bracket tournament. So I'm happy to see that.
Absolutely. Looking through the rest of the bracket, and I guess touching a little bit on Scream as an individual, he did take home the MVP of the tournament with a whole whack of kills. He was a standout player. Now, obviously, he's a famous guy from CS, but a one-dimensional player, I suppose, would be the critique that I most saw of him as a CS player. Would you say that one-dimensional ability to carry your team with just outright frags, do you think that is going to hold up for Scream if this team continues to play together?
I think so, right? I mean, I believe he was maining Sage. I think he was playing Sage throughout the
Yeah.
entirety of that tournament. And I think man, it fits his style so well because you're right, Moses. He was known for being an all aim, no brain style type of Counter-Strike player. And as a Sage, I mean, all he has to do is bait
Having
the
no
crap out
brain
of
as
his
a Sage
team.
main.
Yeah, I mean, it works. It actually works. Yeah, and
No,
I
she'll
think that's
blame
the
herself
beauty
too. She's
of
blamed everyone else, man.
Yeah, I think that's the beauty and the simplicity that Valorant provides is enabling players to have complete identity over exactly what their role is going to be. And I think as for Scream, being able to just bait his team just because he has a heal and just one tapping kids from across the map, that perfectly describes the strengths of Scream. So I mean, I think it makes sense, and I'm excited to see exactly how much more successful he can actually be.
Bro, can someone just like report Potter for toxicity? This is fucking unreal. This is a
What?
riot game, dude.
Okay,
You're
that's
gonna get
crazy. That's
banned, bro. You're gonna
crazy.
get banned. Remember, Diamond is like, you know, trash tier or wherever it is. Just so you know, just in case you've, you know, been eyeing that up. Like you've been like, I'm gonna get up early and just warm up in what is that warm up game that every like garbage player sits there playing for like 10
Kovacs.
hours and then it's a there it is. It's
I
like
know
just play
it
the
because
game.
it's
Just
installed
go
on
and
my
play the game.
computer, Pansy. Thanks for that. I appreciate it.
Every garbage player. No, dude, it winds me up. I'm like, these guys, like, oh god, this feels so mean. I was playing with people who like literally just refuse to spray because they're like, no, I don't understand how it works. But they'll spend an hour in that stupid little game being like, I'm fucking ready. I'm like, how about the fundamentals? How about those
Kovac
basics
scores
that
are
you're
off
just
the charts.
ignoring? Exact, dude, it winds me up. But like, legitimately, it's like Scream's a nutty player. Like, I don't think anyone's surprised he's found a good foundation here, and he's pretty arguably one of the higher. I don't know where you want to put him. I mean, like he's always been that kind of, gun for hire almost. You look at him, it's like, do you want that in a roster? Is it something you want to play with down the line? But for now, it's like it's a turret. You just stick him somewhere and you just let him go, right? You just kind of have to sometimes take the lead off and let him run rampant, and then you're good, right? Like, I watched him play in a couple of the other tournaments. It was in a mix and they won it as well. So like, Scream's definitely a headliner in this for now. If he continues that ability down the line, that's where things get fun. But for now, it's definitely a big game for him.
Mixwell also playing on the team, and Defran, a pro Overwatch player in his own right, and really an even load. I guess that's something that stands out, at least in their stats, is relatively even output across the team, which is always a good sign to see if everyone's playing near or at the same level. And wow, what a nice twofer there for
It's a freebie.
Mixwell, and yeah, and just through the smoke, no less. So shout out to Mixwell. And I suppose the hybrid teams of Overwatch and CS players, do you think that there's anything to talk about there as far as what both sides bring? If Scream is one dimensional, all aim, no brain, what does a player like Defran bring to this style of game? I mean, I'm not sure if either of you have followed him too closely, but he, coming from Overwatch, has had some success, has been playing in almost every tournament that I've seen. This is a guy who's very interested in becoming a top level Valorant player.
Man, Defran,
It could work.
he's the player that I watch, I watch most of Defran's YouTube videos to kind of learn about the game. I think he's freaking nuts. And not only is he nuts, his crosshair placement, there's something to be said about crosshair placement, and I think Counter-Strike players really prioritize crosshair placement over other FPS players. But Defran, coming from Overwatch, that was one thing that I immediately could tell right off the bat, is that, man, this dude understands crosshair placement, and it's just so perfect. In every scenario that I see him in, most of the time, his crosshair placement gets him out of those sticky situations. I really enjoy watching Defran's playstyle. I think he's absolutely going to find a lot of success in Valorant.
Looking
Yeah.
now, as you don't think he's gonna do well, Pansy?
No, I think he's gonna do great. I mean, like what I
You
think
shook your
Paul
head.
set
I
it
just
up
wanted
so
to
well. Like,
nail you to it.
no. I mean, he's a good player. He seems like he's got the good mentality. Like, it's not just. I think that it's not just mechanics these days. You do need to be more of a well-rounded player down the end of the line. I think for now you can get away with being a little bit more one-dimensional. You could just be an aim star. You could just be your kind of cerebral player as such. But I think eventually you do have to kind of cover all bases, and he seems to be able to achieve that. Whether or not that continues down the line and he keeps that sort of mentality is the next thing. Is are you really willing to grind out 10k hours in this, or is this just like a really good way to get back into feeling competitive? Sure, that's when you can put some pressure on people like him. But for now, he's certainly in the right position, and picking up a win will kind of put him in the right spot, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And to put a cap, as we're slowly running out of time here, I wanted to get your final thoughts on this last topic, which is, at what point do you think that these mixed teams who are just kind of coming together for these little tournaments here and there actually decide to nail down a roster and start actually locking in these rosters and practicing and taking to 100%, going all in on whatever it might be? Defran has played on multiple teams. Scream and Mixwell, this is the first time we're kind of seeing them take a tournament win in recent memory in this new game. Do you think that the Screams and the Mixwells of the world, who are still very kind of borderline in that tier 1 CS area, do you think that they make that move? I think that would be bigger news than a potential, maybe not for Scream, but for Mixwell, who recently had success. Do you think that that's the type of guy that will nail out a roster and start practicing?
I don't know.
Maybe.
I
Tell
mean,
me what other
okay,
people
I
are
wanted to
thinking.
get to the. In my mind, what I'm thinking is, okay, so here's my hot take is that you can't really stream practices. If you're taking it actually seriously, it's just not viable. I mean, you could if you're a streamer team, but they don't really go very far. I think the big switch and the big decisive point is when we see the people who've just been capitalizing on it being the next hot thing, right? The hot thing right now is streaming this game and playing these tournaments. when that stops being viable, and when you have to make that choice of, do I just want to stream this for fun, or do I want to go grind mode and not have the ability to stream all the practices that I'm playing for like 5-6 hours of a night, if not more. That's when you'll see someone having to make a bit of a choice here, because let's bear in mind, a lot of these streamers right now who are in these tournaments, and even the like semi-pros who are deciding in between whether they want to or not, this has been a huge uptick in money. I mean, subscribers alone are doubling, tripling for some of these guys. Viewership's huge in comparison. Like, CS was never a really streamer-friendly game ever. I mean, you had occasionally here and there players making quite a good role in it, but this is the new hot thing. So I think if they want to be taken seriously, it's going to be quite obvious, because they just simply won't be streaming every single thing, and that's a lot of money to potentially walk away from when there's no leagues with money up right now. So I think it's we'll see. I think we'll see if they are willing to take that. I'm going to start from ground zero again with potentially money at the end of the line. Sure, like everyone knows that Riot's going to put money behind it, but when that is indecisive, right?
Absolutely. Otter, final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I have to echo that sentiment as well. I'm excited to see. I'm excited to see though if teams approach this a little bit differently, because I think CS:GO, you're right, Lauren. Most pros, or if not all pros, they're not willing to give
Mm.
away how their practice regimen is. They're not willing to give away exactly how they approach the game. But with Valorant, the approach is a lot more simple. The lineups, there's not a lot of secrets to it. Brimstone smokes, it's very straightforward. A lot of these lineups and a lot
Why
of
are
the
you flaming
approaches
me
for the
now?
agents. Look, I'm just trying to look at it from a different
Bruh.
angle, and I think that because the approach is a lot more simple, I think players would probably be more willing to stream their
It would
practices.
be
I
cool.
maybe, and so I think you're right. I could see it. I think you'll see that the seriousness of the game, the esports approach, the competitive approach will be more apparent when players stop streaming their practices. But I think there's a little bit more forgivable leeway here to be able to stream your practices with Valorant
Uh,
as well.
Yeah, that's been something that's constantly we dealt with that in PUBG as well, wanting to see more of the practice side, seeing scrims, that kind of thing, and
Yeah.
realistically, I understand the player approach. There is a downside to streaming your actual practice, and you have to be constantly thinking of, what am I saying, where am I, like, how many, who's subbing, all this kind of stuff. You can't really focus on both. If you truly,
Mm.
in my opinion, want to be the best, you have to kind of lock yourself into only the game, learning from your teammates, all the things that I imagine make good FPS or good esports players, regardless of what you're playing. So it's unfortunate that we can't see both things. Maybe we'll have maybe the technology isn't there yet to be able to see the professional practices without actually having them streamed. But that is going to do it for this week. I have to say, huge shout out to both Pansy and Potter coming on again, and for bringing the analysis and just being tremendous guests. Thank you guys so much for your time today. And also a shout out to juked.gg. They put up a special page for us today. They've been showing us the love. You should do the same. They are a great resource. If you want to keep up to date and make sure you never watch a single minute of whatever's happening in esports, make sure you check out juked.gg. I've been keeping up on it's just great. I love going on there and just seeing what's on at any given time of the day, and you see the
Honestly,
schedules, and it's just what a
it's
tremendous
so
site. I
good.
wish it's so good. And
Like,
this is
because like CS has
thinking
like
back to like
HLTV, but
HLTV, all this stuff. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's so nice to have it for like everything. Because like sometimes I'm like, I kind of want to watch something different. Like what's on, and
What's
there's
going
no
on in Pro
portal for
Smite?
it.
Let's
There's
see. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
that's it.
I
There it is. It's good stuff.
Absolutely. So again, and a big shout out to the production team, Ian and Daniel, behind the scenes, making everything worthwhile and keeping everything working. And you can follow DNP on Twitter as well as every other platform. Make sure you're following this Twitch channel as well at youtube.com/do-not-peak, and on Twitter do-not-peak as well. So thank you guys. We're back next Tuesday at 11 a.m. Pacific time for more Valoranting. Thank you for watching, and I can't wait to see you next week. See you later, guys.